watching Love Island last night in an absolute freaking chokehold. Like, when I tell you the Love Island USA season is so freaking good. I usually like the UK one a lot better, but the USA one this season is killing it. Like, the people are just bringing in the drama, and I live for drama that has nothing to do with me. Like, I love a good trash reality TV, and if you don't watch Love Island, please get into it, because I need to have like a weekly recap of how we're feeling, because it's insane. So they just went to Casa Amor, and if you don't have any idea what Love Island is, it's just a reality dating show. They bring in like hot single girls, hot single guys, and they all go into this house, and it's a quote unquote island. So they're just basically like in this beautiful, beautiful house wearing bikinis, half naked all the time. Girl, it's trash TV. It's giving. And so they start to make couples, and then those couples end up transforming into other couples, and people get mad. And then, long story short, a bunch of people are just dating each other and trying to figure out who their best connection is. The crazy part about Love Island that's so sick and twisted is they have a part called Casa Amor. Casa Amor. So it happens towards like the middle of the season, when some of the couples are already established, where they split up. So the boys go to a different house, the girls stay in that house usually, and they bring in more hot singles to each of the houses. So it's basically like a test. Like, you know, you've been coupled up with this person for weeks now, and they're all talking about being together outside of the villa. And then when push comes to shove and they get presented with another hot single and their original partner is nowhere to be found, a lot of them switch up. So the tea on that is absolutely crazy. So if you're watching Love Island USA, let me know your thoughts, because Leah is really pissing me off. And girl, I'm so deep in the Love Island lore, because tell me why I was scrolling on TikTok and someone was on live discussing it. Like, there was a whole community of us just chatting about our thoughts. And there was so many people backing up Leah. And I am a girl's girl through and through. But I do think Leah has been very much like pick me vibes, especially with Rob. I feel like she says a lot of things and then doesn't own up to it later. And it's like, girl, if you said what you said, you have to stand on business. Like, just, I hate when people say something and then later turn around and don't want to own up to it. So she was kind of pissing me off, a little bit of a pick me kind of vibe. So I didn't really like that. But overall, the season is so freaking good. But in the spirit of trash TV and people's drama and couples and relationships, I want this episode to be about my own experience in prior relationships. And you know what? This podcast, I called it Good for the Soul for a reason. And you know what's good for my soul? Talking shit about my exes sometimes. Okay. I don't really talk about it at all, but sometimes you need to just air out some dirty laundry. And you know what? Men, I feel like, don't watch my content. At least I hope they don't, because my content is for the girls. So hopefully this is just a girl chat. It's between me and you, and we're going to talk about some of my crazy exes, because when I tell you, I have been put through the ringer, and a lot of it was because, like I touched on in my last episode, I grew up very insecure, and especially because I had daddy issues on top of that, the insecure and daddy issues combo, girl. It is a recipe for disaster when you're first starting to get into relationships, especially if you like men, because, girl, when I tell you, I let the most ogre, crazy looking men get to me, it is crazy. Oh my God, I'm like looking out the window if you're watching the YouTube video, because why did I think there was like an optical illusion going on and I thought someone was staring at me? But you got to do what you got to do for the lighting, because I film with this window wide open. So if anyone's staring at me, it is what it is. But I know dating hideous men and giving an ugly guy a chance and then having him switch up and act like you're the ugly one is definitely a universal experience, especially for those of us that have daddy issues, because sometimes we just accept what we do not deserve because we're insecure, and it is what it is. Once you find your worth, and especially once you get out of that relationship and find your worth, you will look back and not even recognize that girl, because there have been some relationships that I've been in that I look back and I'm like, who was that? Who was she? Because it sure as hell was not me. So my first quote unquote serious ex, his name was Angel. Shout out to Angel. And I am saying names because it's like, girl, who cares? I'm married now. The only one's name that I'm not going to say is the last one because, spoiler alert, he's in jail. I think he's in jail currently, girl, and I don't want him to come find me. So we're going to keep that one anonymous. But the first couple are pretty innocent for the most part. I feel like I don't remember much about our relationship, but I do remember we dated for a little while and I was obsessed with him because he was my first boyfriend, like serious boyfriend. And I remember I thought he was so cute and I felt like we got along really well. We dated for a little bit. And when I tell you our breakup, now I look back and it's so freaking funny. But we broke up for, I don't even remember what reason. The point is, I remember I was listening to sad music and I was just going through it, girl. Your girl was sad. She went through her first heartbreak. I feel like that song by, is it T-Pain where he's like, I can put you in a loft cabin somewhere in Aspen. That song, it ain't nothing but a thing. We can change your last name. What's happening? Girl, that song for some reason brings me back to that relationship. It's so funny. So that was my first relationship I would count, but I don't really remember much of it because I was so young. But then after that, we move on to my next relationship. And this one, girl, strap in because the tea towards the end of it is crazy. I dated this guy named Marcus. Shout out to Marcus. When I tell you, I was so in love with this man, or so I thought at that time. And now I look back and I cringe because when I tell you I was in the peak of my daddy issues, like if you guys didn't listen to the first episode, I have a very difficult relationship with my dad, but I lived with him up until I was like in my 20s. So I was very sheltered and I had a lot of insecurities and I had a lot of, let's just say, issues. And I was unmedicated at the time. Okay, so we need to keep that in mind. But I started dating him in, I would say, 8th grade. He was friends with one of my close friends at the time. And she said, oh, I have a friend and he thinks you're cute. You know how middle school is. So point is, we started chatting, I think on MySpace or something. And we fell in love, girl. He was my boo and I was his boo and we were together. But a lot of my daddy issues started to come out, and now I look back and I'm like, oh my god, that poor girl needed therapy so bad. But I was so controlling, and I can look back at it now and own up to it. But I hated that he had friends that were females. I physically could not stand it. Like, I so toxically wanted to be the only woman in his life. And now looking back, it was so unhealthy, but he kind of did the same thing back to me. And we very early on got into this toxic cycle of me trying to control where he was and what he was doing, and not even controlling it as in telling him, you can't do this, you can't do that, but me getting hurt by his actions. So he had a neighbor that lived across the street from him. And it was that thing where he's like, oh, she's like my sister, like blah, blah, blah. And it bothered me so much. Now looking back, I'm like, girl, literally who cares? But I took it so, like, it pissed me off, girl. If you have ever been that kind of girl to hate when your man hangs out with other girls, you know what I'm talking about. And I've since healed. Okay, so this is a judge-free zone. But full transparency, at the time, that's how I felt. I did not want him hanging out with her. And I remember being so upset every time they would hang out. So he started to lie to me, not tell me when they were hanging out, not tell me when they were together. And she started posting photos of them together on MySpace. And I think my thing with that too is she was also a pick-me. And I feel like she was posting it because she knew I was going to be mad. So started to be like, oh, she doesn't want you to be friends with me. Like, let me post pictures with you right now so she knows, like, I'm number one. Like, I'm the sister. I'm number one. So I remember it was like an unspoken beef that I had with this girl where we were like trying to take ownership over this man. Like, who does he care about more, right? So it got very toxic. So when I went to my freshman year of high school, he was still in 8th grade at the middle school. And I don't know how, but we stayed together throughout that whole time. Like, we were together for like 2-3 years maybe. So I was in high school and I was just excited for him to come in. When I was a sophomore, he was going to be a freshman. By that time, once that happened, our relationship was already tumultuous. Like, I just remember us arguing all the time and me being so like emotionally drained all the time. It was very toxic. So by the time he got there to middle school, it was really exciting at first, but then towards the end, it started to be like we both kind of knew something was wrong. So at that time, I had a few close friends. I wouldn't say they were my best friends, but I did have a few close friends. One of them, who shall remain unnamed, had a class with him. As the year progressed and as our relationship started to just not be as good, people in that class that were also my friend were giving me warnings saying, hey, you know that your friend and Marcus are pretty close, right? Like every time there's a little class project or a little like, oh, find a buddy, find a partner in the class, they're always together. They're always having a key. They're always giggling, cackling, and laughing. And like, you know that, right? And I'm like, yeah, I know her. She's cool. Like, we're cool. Like, I think she's just kind of keeping an eye out on things for me, right? So as that keeps going, I did ask him about it and he's like, oh no, ew, like we're just friends. Like blah, blah, blah. So they both were giving me reassurance. Like, no, obviously we're just cool because we both know you. Like, it's all good. So as time goes on, more people start to tell me like, hey, no, like something's up. Like they're always flirting. They're passing little notes to each other. Like you might want to ask them what's up. He was like Ronnie from Jersey Shore, girl. Deny, deny, deny. Like when I tell you, it was to the point that people were trying to write me an anonymous letter. Like I was freaking Sammy Sweetheart getting this anonymous note from all the other people in their class telling me like, open your eyes, sweetheart. Like something's going on with them. I was so in denial because I was like, no, she's my friend. She would never do that to me. Spoiler alert. Yeah, no, she did that to me. So I end up getting too many people telling me this is sus, something's going on. I confronted him about it and he denied. And I can't remember what the catalyst was for all of this to go down, but I think I confronted her about it. Girl, I can't even remember all of the details and I wish I did. But the point is, back to my quote unquote trauma of when we first got together and he was still friends with that girl across the street, even though I was trying to be controlling, I know, telling him like, you need to cut that down. Like, out of respect for our relationship, like you need to stop hanging out with her so much. He didn't, girl. He did not give a fuck. So now that he was doing that with my friend, I was telling him like, well, she's my friend. Like, why are you so buddy with her? Like, you got to chill. He was like, no, like I'm cool with her. She's my friend too. It got to a point where one day after school, before like a 4-day weekend, I had told him like, hey, me or her, like giving very much Rosa vibes, like me or her. When I tell you I got back to school that day after the 4-day weekend, they were together. No shame. Holding hands in front of me, walking around campus. He was walking her to class, carrying her stuff, I think. Like, they were full on in a relationship. And I felt so bamboozled. But girl, more than that, I felt pissed. Like, I am a Scorpio through and through. I wanted to beat her ass. Like, I really wanted to risk it all. And part of the reason I didn't is because of my dad was so scary that I was like, no, if I get into a fight with her, I'm going to go home and get my ass beat. So it's not worth it. But when I tell you, I really wanted to, like, I don't think I've ever wanted to fight someone more in my life than I did in that moment. They continued their relationship. And I want to say they were only together for a couple months, but I had to go to school every day and witness it. And not only that, we had friends in common and some of our friends that we had in common had my back, but some of them didn't, girl. Like some of them still were friends with her, which I mean, I guess, you know, they're not me, so they don't have that personal vendetta, but it was so difficult to go to school and see that and have it rubbed in your face. And I wanted to literally, or I shouldn't say literally, allegedly punch both of them in the face. But I maintained self-control. I think that I did a lot of yapping on Twitter, but other than that, I really think I held myself with a decent amount of grace because I didn't beat either one of their asses and I really wanted to. So I count that as a win, but I have never till this day had a situation like that where a quote unquote friend has gone after a guy that I'm dating or a guy that I'm talking to or a guy that, let alone at that point, I had been with this man for like over 2 years maybe. I've never had that happen to me. So that for sure was like a negative core memory that never left me because ever since then, I just had my eye on people that I was friends with. Like, girl, you cannot trust anybody. And as a Scorpio, we already don't trust people. So for that to happen to me with someone that I was so sure, I was like, you guys are crazy. Like, she would not do that to me. She did it. And when I tell you, this man was not giving like Michael B. Jordan. He was, now looking back, I'm like, ew. It just made no sense. Even till this day, I'm kind of like, girl, I feel like you wanted him just because I had him. Because there is no way that he was giving what you thought he was giving. Like, I had already been with him for a couple years, so I got into it being in middle school. We were already sophomore year of high school, girl, and you're getting with a freshman that I'm with, and you're my friend, and he was not serving a look. It was just because you wanted my man. But that's neither here nor there. So ever since that happened, I never talked to her again. I don't know if it's a Scorpio in me or what, but I can forgive, but I can't forget. So we never talked again. Like when I tell you I never spoke to that girl ever again till this day. But at the end of the day, I didn't want that man. She didn't want that man. So she kind of did me a favor, and hopefully he taught us both a lesson. But honestly, girl, as crazy and as sad as it is to have your friend steal your man, this next story of my next boyfriend after that is probably even a little bit crazier. Okay, because I didn't get him stolen. Spoiler alert. I didn't get him stolen necessarily by another girl. I got him stolen by his cousins or like the gangster life. Like, I don't even know what you want to call it because I don't know anything about that world. Okay, but let me start from the beginning. So post Marcus, your girl was in her healing era, right? She started to realize her worth. I started to focus on myself, and I was kind of just putting myself first, as she should. Time went by after that, and I just stayed single for a little while, talked to a few guys here and there, but I didn't really like anybody in high school like that until this guy came out of the woodworks. Let's call him Benjamin. Okay. So Benjamin comes out of the woodworks. He comes to my school from, I think he had gone to school like in or something. So he comes to my school and he's really close friends with one of my guy friends. They're like super besties. So I don't know how, but I get introduced to him. I didn't know who he was, but he said at that time that he would see me with Marcus and he was into your girl, but he never said anything. So unbeknownst to me, as I'm having all this drama with Marcus, like in the hallways and stuff, my next man is over here peeping me and keeping an eye on me because that's what he told me. He rizzes me up and then he hits me up on Facebook and he is just rizzing me the house down, girl. And I fall head over heels, especially because the last two exes that I was talking about look like rats. And when I tell you, Benjamin was giving. He was serving, at least at the time, he was serving a look. Now he's serving time. Okay, spoiler alert, he's in jail, but we're gonna get there. So he rizzes me up. We end up getting together and fast forward, we're in love. Okay. Right as we start dating, he goes to another school. So I don't see him. He ends up moving literally to a whole nother city and I don't see him as much. So our relationship very quickly became long distance, but for the first few like months, I would say it was so sweet. It was so like, when I talk like puppy love, it was so cute. He would come over at the time. You guys know I had an alcoholic dad, so no way in hell he was going to let a boy come to the house. And my mom was like, girl, good luck with that. So he would come and hang out with me at my grandparents' house. He's there for me when my mom's dad, my grandpa passes away. He comes to the wake. Like my mom waited for him. He got dropped off in the city. He came with me. He was consoling me. Like when I tell you, I had so much trauma bonding with this man. I had no idea that could get a little ratchet. Girl, like they got some gang affiliations out there that I had no idea. Like I just was clueless. So when he moved over there, started hanging out with his cousins a lot. Like he had a lot of trauma from his parents the same way I had trauma from my parents. So I feel really lucky that I went the route of being like a pussy. I'm not going to lie. Like I'm too scared to do anything too bad. And I think it's because I'm a girl and my dad was absolutely terrifying growing up. But he turned out to be the opposite. So when I met him, he was so innocent. He literally went to like drum practices and he was touring colleges and he was very innocent. When he moved, he started hanging out with his cousins a lot. And to say that he fell into the wrong crowd is probably an extreme understatement. He turned into someone I absolutely did not recognize. Like he started getting into like the gang stuff and started talking to me less. And we never really broke up. It kind of just fizzled out, which also was really triggering because my biggest fear at that time that I've learned in therapy was being abandoned. I have carried that fear for so long of an anxious attachment style. And so when he kind of started trickling down the communication, there was no closure. I was a literal psycho because I was like, how are we going to go from being so in love, puppy love kind of vibes, to all of a sudden we literally don't talk to each other at all? It got to the point where he would say, oh yeah, I'm going to go over this day and hang out at this time. The day and time would come and homeboy was nowhere to be found. Girl, when I tell you, I was a desperate psycho for this man. Like I refused to believe that it was over, even though it was clearly over, and he didn't need to say it because it was obvious, but I needed to hear it. And so it dragged on for maybe like a year. A lot of it I blacked out, as you can tell is my pattern, so I don't really remember a lot of it. But I remember one time when I knew, okay, this is over. I need to just let this man go because this is not the vibes. I was living with my parents and I remember my dad and our relationship was so tumultuous. He like started screaming at me, acting like he was going to square up with me because of something that happened with my little sister. And I remember packing up my car and getting out of there. And I was like, I'm tired of this. Like I'm going to go live on my own. And I don't know how I did it, but I ended up going to one of those like college type apartments where it's for students, but you don't necessarily have to be a student. And where I was living was close to a university. So I went over there and they approved me to rent a room in an apartment. So it was like a 4-bedroom apartment, but you rent a room. So I don't know if any of you guys have ever done that, like lived in an off-campus housing situation, but it was very much that. You rent a room, but everything else is a shared space. So I rent a room without knowing any of my roommates. And once I met my roommates, I was like, oh no, girl, this is not the vibe. Like these are not the vibes. But I was excited to kind of like quote unquote live on my own and be an adult, right? So I move in, I put all my stuff in there, and long story short, I don't know how this man comes down to see me, because when I tell you, he was dodging every chance to come hang out with me that he could. So mortifying thinking about it now, that I was quite borderline begging someone to come hang out with me, when nowadays I would be like, girl, bye. So homeboy comes down, but he doesn't come down alone. Obviously, he comes down with his cousins and his brother and I don't know what, just a whole cock fest rolling up to my apartment. I can't have all these people in my apartment because I have a room. I have a tiny room with a tiny restroom, and the living room and all that is a shared space. And my roommates had people over all the time, and they had already been living in that apartment. I kind of just joined and rented that empty room. So his cousins are like going to hang out in the car, going to do I don't know what, while he hangs out with me in the apartment. When I tell you, it was so awkward. It was very much giving like two strangers in a room. It was so awkward. Looking back, I'm absolutely mortified that I put myself in that situation. Long story short, I think that's probably the last time that I saw him. We didn't really keep in contact after that. He started dating a girl without officially cutting things off with me. And how did I find out? On Instagram. To add to my trauma with men. Like, why did I not block this man and forget he ever existed? But I'm telling you, the daddy issues will really do it to you. So fast forward, I'm working at Buffalo Wild Wings, okay? Doing my shift. Haven't heard from this man in months. And one of my friends who was let me know these men got arrested for armed robbery. These men, according to the article, allegedly pulled up to like an electronics store or something and had like pew pews with them, tried to jack some TVs. Girl, I don't even remember because it was so long ago. According to the article, they had some weaponry on them and they went into this electronics store and tried to take some TVs or some valuables. Like, I don't even know the whole context around what it was because when I heard that, I'm telling you guys, I grew up very sheltered and I grew up being very scared of my dad. So I was terrified. Like, to me, it's like, how can you go do that? That's so scary. Like, you're a criminal. Like, you're crazy. You're even crazier than me. So that was the last thing that I ever heard of him. I remember being nosy with my friend and like trying to look up like what the actual charges were because I was so shook. Can you imagine this guy that you're in love with that turns into a whole different person that you don't even recognize anymore, ends up getting sentenced to, girl, it was like 10 years or something, like something crazy, because he is still in jail to this day, as far as I know. So from 10 years ago to now, homeboy has not seen the light of freedom because of a armed robbery or something, allegedly. I just thought it was so insane to see someone that when I met, he was into drumming and he was into UFC and he was very much like a normal kid, to then turning into a criminal with like a decade's worth time of jail under his belt. Like, that is absolutely insane. And not jail, prison, essentially. But I just know how mortified I am to think of how obsessed I got with this man that clearly wanted nothing to do with me. But I do think it taught me a very valuable lesson in knowing your worth and how I never want to behave ever in my life, and how I've never behaved since then. Like, that is probably the only relationship that I have fully 1000% embarrassed the hell out of myself, willingly knowing that I was embarrassing myself and still kind of went along with it. Despite how negative and crazy that whole relationship ended up turning out, I do think that I learned a lot from it. How to understand that, girl, if a man don't want you, you don't want him. Okay? You have to know your worth and really remember that these men ain't shit. But anyways, that is the bulk of that story. I feel so humiliated recanting all of that because I'm like, who was that girl? Because I do not recognize her. The way that I was acting and the way that I was so feral over this man, who now I look back and I'm like, girl, relax. Yes, he was a cutie, but it did not call for all that. Like, it was just, I think what made me spiral and get so like crazy was it was such a mind fuck. And honestly, after that relationship ended, I entered my hoe era, which, say what you want to say, girl. This is a safe space. This is a space for the girls. And I don't care what any of you say. We have all had a hoe era. And if you didn't, I'm so sorry, bestie. You missed out. And I hope it's not too late for you and time has not escaped. But it is such a freeing time in your life. Like, I cannot remember a period of time where I made the most memories. I went out all the time. I hung out with my girls. I met guys. I just had such a fun time. I was living for the nights that I can't remember with the people that I won't forget. Like, that's what that time was giving. Like, if you guys had a period of time where you did that, then you know what I'm talking about. Because then after you have that era, usually you get into a serious relationship, which is exactly what happened to me. I ended up meeting my husband shortly after. And our relationship also went 100 miles per hour, like 0 to 100 real quick. We met through one of my coworkers. Blind date. Like, when I tell you, it was legit a blind date. I had been telling my coworkers for so long, like, I'm tired of being single. I'm like, do any of you guys know anybody? Like, I'm trying to get wifed up. And she said, oh, my husband has a cousin and he, I feel like, fits your vibe so well. I feel like you guys have a very similar personality and I think you would hit it off. And I said, girl, say less, hook it up. So she set up a blind date for us. He came to pick me up. Like, I'm telling you, it was 0 to 100 really quick. He came to pick me up and, girl, I was in my party era. Okay. So I came out with a bottle of Bucanas, 2 cups of ice. And I said, we're gonna have a good time, especially because I was nervous. Like, never had I had a true like blind date like that before. So I was like, girl, if he's not giving, I'm gonna need to have some liquid courage. Okay. So I went out there with the Bucanas And once we got to our destination, safe and sound, we ended up drinking. I forgot my ID. And so when we got to where we were supposed to go, which was like a little bar, I couldn't get in because I didn't have my ID and I was like 22 at the time. Actually, no, I think I was like 24. Regardless, I couldn't get in. So we go next door to this restaurant and we just hang out there. We order some drinks. I'm over here sneaking some of his drink because the waiter asked me for my ID and I didn't have it. By the end of the night, we're making out, girl. It was like we had known each other forever. We felt so comfortable and it was over ever since then. We couldn't stop hanging out. We hung out all the time. We went on a bunch of different dates and I want to say we dated for like 2 or 3 years until we got engaged and then COVID happened. So we didn't have a wedding. I feel like that's why a lot of people don't really know that I'm married because I don't have wedding photos. And my husband is not a social media guy, girl. Like he does not want to be on social media, which I'm totally okay with. So I don't post him. I feel like you got to respect people's boundaries and I want to put my life out on social media. So I do share a certain amount of things, but there's also a boundary where you got to respect that someone else wants privacy. So I kind of try to keep that boundary there and respect the fact that he's not about it and that is totally fine. Not everybody is. Girl, I would not. If I didn't want to be on social media and I was with someone that did it and was like, you have to be in it, I would be like, girl, fuck you. If I don't want to be in it, I don't have to be in it. So I really respect the fact that he doesn't want to be on social media. And yeah, that's why you guys don't really see much of him. But because of COVID, we did not have a wedding. We got married legally and we did all of that, but we never had a wedding. And although I do look back and wish that we would have done something, like at least a small gathering as best as we could have, I think that everything happens for a reason. And I really like where I'm at in life financially. I like the life that I live. I like the style. I like how much money I got in my bank account. And I like that I didn't spend tens of thousands of dollars on a one-day party for the sake of memories. And maybe I'll change my mind and maybe for our anniversary one year, we'll have a big party. But I don't know. I also feel like I'm on this fertility journey and I have wanted to be a mom for so long. So I think that my priority really lies there because especially now knowing that we might have to do IVF, like I don't know what that looks like cost wise. And I think that, like I said, everything happens for a reason. And maybe God knew that my plan to motherhood wasn't going to be easy. And so I think that our funds at this point are kind of allocated towards our future and towards different things. And it is what it is. I mean, like I said, maybe one day we'll do it. But as far as right now, it's not a priority for me. But yeah, girl, I hope that you enjoyed this spill sesh because I love nothing more than spilling some tea. So I hope that you guys enjoyed it. If you have any crazy stories of your exes, please let me know. If you're watching on YouTube, please comment it down below. Comment it on Instagram. I would love to hear it because it's absolutely insane. But as always, thank you guys so much for listening. I love you so much. Don't forget to give this podcast a 5-star review, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Give it a big thumbs up on YouTube. Follow the podcast at Good for the Soul Pod on Instagram. Follow me at britneydelsol, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, all of the above. I love you guys so much and I will see you in the next episode. Bye, girl. He don't want to be saved, don't save him. That is not my, don't claim him. About 20 missed calls, he faded. White boy wasted Channing Tatum. He don't want to be kept, don't keep him.